Greetings everyone, this is Ohio Dan. This video should be a fairly short explanation of why it is and how it is that our education system is pretty broken. And I'm talking about in the United States, but I'm sure this is true in other countries as well. And I realize that public education has never been very good. In some ways, the experiment with public education is sort of a novel thing. I realize that people have been poorly educated to a large extent throughout human history. Your average person out there has never really been that well educated. I get that you could talk about formal education versus learning a trade and all that. I'm not trying to sound like an academic here because I'm not. It's just one of these deals where it's never really been very good, and there are still some huge flaws when it comes to things that go beyond even deliberate indoctrination, right? Even if you want to put that to the side, our education system waters down things so much and misleads kids so much that they're not really taught to think for themselves. It has huge shortcomings, and it really, I don't think, can be a positive part of the solution for a lot of the dumb things that people tend to believe in, frankly. To show how much of what we are taught as children is misleading and full of half-truths, you can take the sun is an average star myth as a case study. And that's the example that I want to use in this video. Because I remember when I was in school in the 90s and early 2000s, we were always taught, well, the sun is just kind of an ordinary G-type star. It's really nothing special. It's an average star in terms of its size. It's not really different than most of the other stars around us. Well, it actually turns out that that's complete nonsense and BS. In truth, our sun has more mass than over 9/10 of the stars in our galaxy, making it far larger than average compared to most of our neighboring stars. It's not true that it's average by any reasonable definition. And what's happened is the education system, science teachers basically, have decided, well, it's not a great big star, and it's not a small little red dwarf star, so it's an average star. Well, no, it isn't. It's bigger than 90% of the stars out there. It's way bigger than what your average system is in terms of the mass of the star in that system. While the sun is also much smaller than the very large stellar objects out there, this doesn't really make it an average star by any realistic assessment, except that's what our public education system teaches us anyway. It's too lazy and too inflexible. The educators are too lazy and inflexible to actually say, well, the sun's pretty unique. It's not super rare, but most of the stars around us are quite small, probably don't have planets that can contain life. And that's actually where I'm going with this. It shows how much of we are taught in the school system is often a gross oversimplification that doesn't really have much practical value if, for example, we wanted to assess the probability of finding habitable worlds outside of our solar system in the future. In other words, if you think, well, the sun's just an average star, so there should be billions and billions of other sun-like stars near us, that's not true. Most stars are probably too small to support life because the planets that would have to exist around them would be so close to the star in order to get enough heat that every time you had something like a coronal mass ejection or a solar flare, it would just strip the atmosphere, right? It's too close to the star that if any activity occurs that would normally challenge life on that planet that was developing, it would just destroy it. Unlike our sun, which is a lot larger, we can be further away from it and still get enough heat without that happening to our atmosphere, without that being stripped away over time. And so people are not taught this. Kids are not taught this at all. Well, the sun's average, so there should be life everywhere. No, it doesn't work that way. There's no practical value in what you're being taught when it comes to this topic matter. I know the topic matter I'm using here is pretty random, but it's a very good example of how just tweaking the facts a small amount can completely change your conclusion in a way that makes it to where you don't have a simple grasp on the issues. I'm not saying that I'm that knowledgeable about it, but our sun's not an average star. If you actually do your own research, what we've been taught about this type of thing has been complete nonsense. So whether well-intentioned or not, poorly taught ideas like this can have negative effects for those who don't eventually learn to do their own analysis and their own research. And that's just basically what we have to do. We can't rely on the education system to do much of anything. In the United States, you've got the example of Common Core math as well, where you're supposed to go through this funky process that I don't really even understand or want to understand to do basic arithmetic. It's not helpful. It's not useful. Before that, you had your No Child Left Behind, which was basically No Child Gets Ahead in terms of the way a lot of that was implemented. It's just not actually engineered, or it's just not actually established in such a way to actually help people think. I agree with what a lot of other people have said, like Raging Golden Eagle. It's basically designed for us to know just enough about basic stuff, even if it's warped and corrupted, to be able to semi-function in a way that the ruling class wants us to, but it doesn't want us to actually get very smart. It's not really designed for people to start thinking for themselves. It's not designed for people to question things. It's designed for people to conform. And so everybody's taught this myth that, well, the sun's just average, we're nothing special, there's probably life all around us, so our lives are inconsequential, which they are, but not necessarily for that reason. And it just becomes a complete misinformation, warped perspective that's not actually true. Most stars probably don't have habitable planets around them for a variety of reasons, but this is one of them. Sun-like stars are rare. Most stars don't have that much energy. The planets don't benefit from their energy as much, and it's a lot less likely that they can support life because they'd have to be closer than what Mercury is to the sun. But it's just nonsense from the start, right? What we're taught is not true from the beginning. And so people have these misconceptions about life being around everywhere when it's really pretty unlikely, and this is one of the reasons why they think this, because they're given this misinformation. So it's important to question the things we are taught to accept as facts by the education system and other institutions like the media and the state itself, what you hear from government press conferences and whatnot, because otherwise we can be easily misled by inaccurate or poorly presented information, not to mention any deliberate indoctrination that's taking place, not to mention deliberate false concepts, ideological-based concepts that are being indoctrinated into kids. And I'm not going to go into this very much, but you can see this with trans issues and climate change and kids being radicalized everywhere. That's done on purpose. There's an agenda behind that. And that's part of what passes for education today. So basically the point of this video is to say, I don't think the education system can really be part of the solution for anything. It's very unlikely that it's going to help make anything better because it's so broken. It's not built to teach kids practical skills either. It's not built to foster, as I've stated, an ability to think for oneself. It's not designed around anything that doesn't really just give people the very basic stuff to be kind of a zombie through life, pretty much. And that's not a positive thing. That's not something that I think we can rely on to provide any sort of solution. This whole idea of people just need to be better educated probably isn't going to cut it, in other words. And this idea, as I've mentioned, this example, what we're taught in science class, well, the sun's just an average star. No, it isn't. It's bigger than 90% of the stars out there. You're not going to find a system like ours just anywhere. There are stars that are bigger, but the bottom line is that we're fairly rare. Not super rare, but fairly rare in terms of what people that actually look at space, what actual astrophysicists, astronomers, whatever, have been able to view. It's pretty rare. And we're taught the opposite of that. We're taught that, oh, there's nothing special going on here. And in reality, we are kind of unusual. And definitely it's not true that you can just find life in any other system. Another thing is most systems are binary or they have more than one star. So how does that affect whether life can develop on a planet? Probably it's not a good thing. We're not taught that either. So that's just one example. Again, the Common Core math, trans ideology, climate change ideology. Yes, there are some right-leaning ideologies in the more private schools too, schools that just want to base everything on Christianity versus evolution and all that. So many things about our education system is broken. And because of that, I don't think it's that realistic to include those institutions in any solution that we're going to have for our society basically becoming any smarter. If anything, it's one of the things keeping it dumbed down. And so I'm very skeptical about any solution on the basis of just educating people in this system at least better, because I think the system's already too broken to allow that to happen.